BGS 10, PSA 10, BGS 9.5, PSA 9, SGC 10, HGA 10, CSG 10. There are so many grades, and people are always asking me, Teapot, which grade should I buy? This week, I'm ready to help answer those questions. This week, I'm getting nerdy, and we're gonna get our hands dirty. All right, welcome back to another video. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and this week, I promise I'm not gonna talk like that the entire time. I really don't like hearing my voice in the first place, but I'm definitely not gonna drive myself and all of you crazy by talking like that. But what I am going to do this week is talk about what grade do I buy. I was at the National, I kept running into different people. They were asking, hey, I got a PSA 9, I got a PSA 10, I got a BGS 9.5, what do you think? Which one's the better value? There is a lot that goes into those decisions. And so this week, I want to kind of take it initially from the basics, take it from the bare basics about the different grading companies and how they kind of stack up in terms of price. And then we'll break down and use ratios and intelligence reports and market movers to kind of do a little bit more digging. So let's just jump right into it. All right, so a few important disclaimers before I get started on this, because when it comes to grading companies, when it comes to multipliers, when it comes to ratios, there are so many factors that really matter, the biggest of them being pop counts, and I'm going to touch on pop counts a lot. But in addition to that, I just want to put this out there. Sports Card Investor, myself, Market Movers, we are not affiliated with any one particular grading company. We are not beholden to any of them. So this is not an endorsement of any specific grading company. It's also not to bash any specific grading company. Sports Card Investor offers bulk submission grading with BGS, with CSG, with PSA, and with SGC. And my opinion is that all of these companies really have their place. I think it's a good thing that there are multiple grading companies, that you have different options. People like different aesthetics, they like different slabs, they've had different experiences with different companies. And even with a company that, the emerging companies like HGA, which are doing really innovative things with the slabs, custom labels, color matching labels, things like that. It's exciting, and it's exciting to see the landscape continuing to change when it comes to grading cards. One really important note, you'll hear this a lot, especially if you watch a lot of YouTube content creators. They'll say buy the card, not the slab. That's especially true when it comes to vintage. The farther you go back in time, the more these ratios get really, really tricky and in many ways become somewhat obsolete or irrelevant. You have to look at pop counts. You have to look at the actual cards. Centering on vintage is a big issue. The color saturation is a big part of it, which doesn't even always get factored into the grade itself necessarily. So, just depending on which card it is, buy the card, not the slab. And then I say buy what you like. Support the companies that you've had a good experience with. That's just, basic business practice. But if you had a really good experience with PSA or BGS or SGC or any of the other companies, then definitely, continue to support them and try to help them grow their business, and you can become an ambassador. So finally, take advantage of the ratios, also known as multipliers. And I put the asterisks on there because I'm going to clarify what I mean. We're going to spend basically the entire episode this time talking about that. So that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to deciding which card you want to buy in which grade. All right, first of all, I'm just going to walk you through, and some of you may be familiar with this if you've been in the game for a long time, but it's also really important for people that are just getting started to kind of become aware of the different grades. And so I'm going to go through hierarchically the different grades, starting with BGS, also called Beckett, BGS 10 Black Label. This is a BGS 10 Pristine. It's a black label, meaning the label is all black, and what that means is centering edges, corners, and surface all got 10s. This is a flawless card in the eyes of Beckett, and this is the grade, this is the slab that commands by far the highest premium, many times in multiples over a PSA 10, and so that is the highest grade. Next up, kind of neck and neck, you have BGS 10 Pristine. Now that's going to be 3 10s and 1 9.5 between the four grading components, and you also have the SGC 10 Pristine, sometimes called the SGC 10 Gold Label. These two kind of I put on the same level. You'll see that the prices of these cards tend to, kind of be around the same ballpark. Now, I will say, and I put the little X through this, and this is not to bash SGC. That's kind of a mouthful. I would not personally buy an SGC10 gold label pristine card. And the reason being is it's really hard to gauge the market for them. It's hard to resell. It's not particularly liquid. It seems like the prices really ebb and flow depending on the day of the week, the season, more than other cards where there's regular sales happening. There's just not the baseline, and it's not quite the same as the Ultimate Prestige with the Black Label BGS 10. I also don't really like the label on the SGC 10 Pristine. I don't like the gold. To me, there's a lot of opportunity to really spice that up. They could make it real gold foil. They could do a lot with the label to really make it pop and make it feel like a really, really superior card and a superior slab. So I would buy the BGS 10 before I would buy the SGC 10 Pristine. And so I'll kind of mark that here, kind of ghost it out in the background as we're stacking up this hierarchy. Next up, kind of the, I guess, no pun intended and no reference to the previous, the kind of gold standard, the market standard, the PSA 10. These are the highest grade that PSA offers. They don't have a superior grade above that. Nat Turner's been very clear about saying that they won't go to any kind of subgrades or a PSA 10 plus or anything like that. So unless you're going the route of like a Mike Baker authenticated gold or platinum label, MBA certification, this is the highest you're going to get with a PSA slab. Next up, SGC 10, and then also the BGS 9.5. Now these two, they kind of tend to be in the same ballpark. Tend to see the SGC 10s a little bit higher than a BGS 9.5. But really important thing to note here when it comes to BGS 9.5s is that not all BGS 9.5s are created equal. Now, in market movers, we just have BGS 9.5. But what you have is actually the differences between the subgrades and how they can kind of make up different grades almost within the BGS 9.5 distinction. So the first one you'll see is when there is a 10 and 3.95s. That's what's going to be called typically a true gem plus. So you'll see gem mint on the BGS slab, and people refer to this as a true gem plus, meaning plus with the 10. Next up would be a true gem, which is 4.95s, and then you'll have just a gem mint BGS 9.5 with maybe a 9 and the 3.95s. So the prices can fluctuate on these, especially if people think that there's an opportunity to crack the slab and resubmit to PSA. Or potentially there is actually even a service where you can take a card that you have with Beckett and send it back into them for a grade reconsideration. Basically, you have to pay the fee for grading, but you could send the True Gem Plus back in for an evaluation. They'll look at it in the slab and determine whether or not it would qualify for the next grade up. So you could take that True Gem Plus, you could send it back to Beckett and say, hey, would you reconsider looking at this to see if it would qualify for a BGS 10 Pristine? And they might give it the bump, which could give it a nice premium. So that's Beckett, that's BGS 9.5. And again, I mentioned, we just have BGS 9.5 and market movers, and the reason being is that there's no way to distinguish the subgrades right now with eBay's data. People don't put the distinctions in their eBay titles. The photos are often too small or not straight enough or something. So eventually it'd be nice to get it to the point where we can even make that level of distinction between the subgrades. But right now, BGS 9.5 is just something to always look at when you're buying them. Not all 9.5s are created equal. So put those two on kind of the same level, typically with SGC 10 a little bit higher, and then the subgrades bumping those down a little bit lower on the BGS 9.5. Next up, the PSA 9. PSA 9, obviously pretty straightforward. The next level down, there is no PSA 9.5, so it's PSA 10 and PSA 9. And then SGC 9.5 kind of also tends to be on the same level as a PSA 9. Finally, a BGS 9. Again, subgrades do matter here. Subgrades can come into consideration. You can see on this one, it's actually got two 9.5s, a 9, and an 8.5, which is why it rounds out to a 9. So always look at the subgrades. You can have BGS 9s that hover around a PSA 9 or go for slightly less than a PSA 9 and an SGC 9.5. All right, so let's take a scenario, kind of a hypothetical scenario here, and help you understand the price differences between these. And this is specifically, think ultra modern, think 2017, 18, 19, 20, 2021 product, base cards, and the basic refractors, silvers, refractors, hollows, things like that, okay? The sort of more highly printed stuff, the more ubiquitous cards, If we were starting out with a PSA 10, and the PSA 10 price of this particular card is around $1,000, it's actually really difficult to gauge what a BGS 10 and what a BGS 10 black label are going to come in at. It has everything to do with population counts. Some cards with BGS, I'll call it hit the pristine more often. Court King's Blank Slate is a set that's done pretty well with BGS 10. Those tend to grade really well. You get the absolute glass cards that tend to do really well with the Beckett, with the BGS 10s, black label and pristine. So if there's higher, pop counts of those with Beckett, the premium is going to come down. If it's a pop one, none higher, pristine or black label, obviously would not have any higher, then the premium is just, it's really tough to gauge, and that's typically where just fair open market on an auction is what ultimately sets that price. So $1,000 on a PSA 10, and then if we're lumping SGC 10 and BGS 9.5 together sort of into the same bucket, those for the same card you could expect to see somewhere around typically $500 to $650, and then on the PSA 9, SGC 9.5, BGS 9, you're going to be looking at somewhere in $250 to like $335 typically for the same card. And this is where the multipliers and the ratios come into play. You're going to see somewhere between 1.5 and 2x between the PSA 10 and the SGC 10 and BGS 9.5, and then you're going to see 3 to 4x on the PSA 9, SGC 9.5, and BGS 9. And so this is where we take this data and we jump over to our intelligence reports and market movers to really be able to look at things more holistically within a specific set to kind of understand what types of prices we should be paying. So what I've done here is, first off, I've gone to our intelligence reports, which is this little light bulb icon, and I've gone to grade ratios, and I've filled in these prompts, and I'm comparing PSA 10 to SGC 10 for 2019 and 2020 Prism football, just as an example. I mentioned again ultra modern, and if we kind of scroll down, I like to go to the 7-day average. If you use the ending average tab, what can happen is you can end up with transactions that are old, and a transaction from 3 months ago on a more rare card like this Mecole Hardman, SGC 10. Obviously not a lot of those out there. This hasn't sold in 3 months. His overall prices can fluctuate drastically in that 3-month time frame, so it's hard to kind of really use these ratios on an ending average basis. But if we use the last 7, it's only going to look at cards that have had transactions in the last 7 days, and it's going to use the average of those sales from those 7 days as well. So in this particular case, we have overall an average of 2 to 1 on the PSA 10 to SGC 10, and I mentioned that on that final slide that I was showing you, that the prices can go anywhere from $500 to say $625, $650 for that, compared to $1,000 on a PSA 10. So what you can do is you can kind of scroll down, and we see standard deviation of 0.53. So this is going to show you with this little exclamation point the cards that are the biggest outliers, and from there you can really do your research to make a decision where the actual opportunity might be. And typically it's one of two things. On this high end at 2.81, either this card is overpriced and this one is a healthy price, or this card is underpriced and this one is a healthy price. And in order to get to that information, you really need to go and you need to look at the charts. You need to compare across multiple variations for the player. You need to compare the player to other players, and you can do a lot of that by stacking up the grade ratios, variation ratios, and player ratios. If you haven't watched the video that I did, the tutorial video that I did on intelligence reports yet, I really recommend that you watch that. I've also covered it in a few live streams. That's a lot to get into in one episode, so I'm not going to kind of dig into how to slice and dice that, but this report will sort of give you the starting point. It'll give you the data to say, okay, what type of multiplier should I expect to be paying across this data set, and then you can look for those opportunities. And it's kind of funny here to see, for example, Daniel Jones at 1.27x on his Prism base PSA 10, whereas Kyler on his Prism Silver is at 2.81x. It's just, it's really fun to kind of dig in there and say, okay, somebody got a deal somewhere recently, or somebody overpaid. So that's PSA 10 to SGC 10, 2 to 1. And if we look at PSA 10 to BGS 9.5, I did go back to 2017 and 2018 Prism basketball, there has not been as much getting graded recently with Beckett over the last 2 years. So I went back a couple of years to know that there's more sales, more BGS 9.5s, and more to go off of. But again, you see this average of 1.98. Again, you're going to see that pretty consistently on the last 7 days. 2.03, I mentioned SGC 10s tend to go a little bit more for a little bit more than the BGS 9.5s. But in this case, you can kind of scroll down too, and you can see that De'Aaron Fox at a multiplier of almost 3.9. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see, for example, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, barely even higher on these recent sales for his PSA 10 to BGS 9.5 Prism Green. Now, if we compare PSA 10 to PSA 9, this is one that people constantly really do. And knowing this information and having this data kind of in the back of your mind, it helps when you're not sure or when there's not recent comps. So it really helps on lower population cards. For example, you look at this J.K. Dobbins card. Now, this can get really tricky when there's not a lot graded yet in general. He doesn't have a lot graded. J.K. Dobbins doesn't. And I'm kind of expecting big things from him this year with the Ravens. But pop 20 on his PSA 10, pop 2 on his PSA 9. Not a lot graded. But you can see that this multiplier at 6.83 is way out of whack. Right now, people are paying that severe premium for the PSA 10 low population. That's not something I would be doing on a card like this, because that there's going to be more graded. If he does have a big year this year, there's definitely going to be more graded, and that card is probably only going to be forced downward just because of the inflation on the low pop count initially. But again, you can kind of see 3.5 to 1. That is pretty normal. 3.5. It could be as low as 3. Could be as high as 4 on the PSA 10 to the PSA 9. It feels like I've seen this kind of stabilize and come more down to the 3.5 range or lower over the last 3 to 6 months. This time last year, it felt like it was really pushing more around 3.75 to 4x. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken Justin Herbert's Prism base card, and I've sort of stacked up the different grades, and you can just kind of see PSA 10. And this is almost like that final slide that I did comparing the prices. $642 for his PSA 10. Next up is his SGC 10 at $325. Next up, his BGS 9.5, and this is really interesting when I look at this, because $222 compared to $325 seems really low. But if I scroll down to the stats and I've got this sorted, what I can see is that the last sale was almost a month ago, I guess 3 weeks ago, on his BGS 9.5. So there has been a 3-week, kind of time lapse since then. Be interesting if I were to go back and let's just actually look at like the last 30 days and then check and see what's happened with prices. And yes, you can see that his SGC 10 in the last 30 days has gone up 48%. So you have to figure that this card, which hasn't sold in 3 weeks, on a new transaction would be selling much closer to $326, maybe $300, $310, somewhere in that ballpark. But again, you can kind of come up here and you can kind of look at that just by eyeballing these charts like this and seeing how the prices stack up. So $200 on the SGC 9.5, $183 on the PSA 9, and then the BGS 9 at $175. And then finally you have Raw, which is always a wild card, especially on this really new ultra modern stuff, which has had real issues with centering and edges. You're gonna take a gamble if you're gonna be buying one of those sort of sight unseen on eBay with the hopes of grading it. So that's why people are paying these premiums even on a BGS 9 or a PSA 9. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to kind of point out. I've talked about vintage. Now, look at a set like 1986 Fleer, and you can look at the Jordan, or you can look at, for example, I've pulled up the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar card here, and the last sale on the PSA 10 Kareem was back on the 1st of July, and that card sold for $6,290. A PSA 9 actually sold on the same day for just $500. So when we talk about multiples, ratios, obviously on vintage, this like 3 to 1, 4 to 1 ratio is not what we're seeing here. And in fact, if we scroll down to the card ratios section, you can see that the ratio for this particular card is at almost 21 to 1 on the most recent sales. Now, time frame here, very low pop 94 on the PSA 10, and this one sold, back on the 30th of June. More recent sale on the PSA 9 at $305, but whoever got that got an absolute deal. I mean, there's really no way around that. And if you were to pull up this data for the 1986 Fleer set on the ratios page, even overall, I think it's somewhere around 7 or 8 to 1 is the average ratio of the 10 to 9 for the 1986 Fleer set. So somebody's got a deal on this Kareem, and that's where you can really look for some of these opportunities on the other stuff too. You can see that this card was sort of plateauing, and now it's come down somewhat significantly over the last two sales. This being said, it could have something to do with that principle that I talked about buying the card and not the grade. Really important to evaluate that. A lot of these serious consigners and auction houses have high quality scans of the cards so that you can really evaluate what does the card look like inside of the slab. But something to consider when it comes to vintage. There could be opportunities there too. All right, very last thing. This is something I was actually kind of asking, and I posted this on Instagram on my personal account recently. I was asking people this at the National, and the question is basically, would you rather have a PSA 10 base card of a player, their base rookie, base chrome, base prism, PSA 10, or a PSA 9 silver or refractor? And what I did here was I pulled up Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Fernando Tatis Jr., and Shohei Ohtani. Their Topps Chrome rookie cards, their base and refractor, PSA 10 and PSA 9. And then what I did, just to be able to compare cleanly, was I untoggled each of these, the PSA 9s in the base and the PSA 10s in the refractor, so that we could scroll down and compare prices. And just ask yourself this question. Would you rather have the PSA 10 base pop 2,777 for $349? Or would you rather have the PSA 9 refractor pop 148 for $290 of Shohei? Same with Tatis Jr. Would you rather have pop 8,580 base card, PSA 10 for $267, or the PSA 9 Topps Chrome refractor, pop 631 for $233? Same with Vladdy, 228 to 144, significantly different pop counts. Same with Bichette, $80 versus $53. And at this price, $53 for Bichette on a PSA 9 refractor, that seems like a very good deal. I might try to go buy one of those right after this. So when you're asking yourself, what would I rather buy? Which grade should I buy? I'm a fan of buying rarity, scarcity, high demand, low pop cards. Not that, the refractors are high demand or super low pop, but when you start getting into the grades, PSA 9, PSA 10, they are significantly lower pop than their base counterparts. I think that over time we're going to see these base cards, especially on recent years with the print runs going up, continue to, at best, plateau for the highest profile players, and for most others, continue to come down as people focus on buying their short printed, serial numbered, more rare, better looking cards than the base cards. All right, I hope this was helpful. I hope this helps answer some questions. If you're wondering what to grade and what to buy, go ahead and check out marketmoversapp.com. It's got all the information about Market Movers and our different plans. You can scroll down. You can see my cheesy grin on this page, and scroll all the way down to the bottom, and it'll tell you all the different features with our two different plans. You can also download the app on the App Store for Apple and Android, and you can always download our free Sports Card Investor app, which is completely free to use and has lots of awesome data and card rankings that update every single day. I've got a public live stream coming up this next Wednesday. If you follow this channel, make sure to have that bell icon smashed so that you'll know when we're going live next Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I can't wait to talk to you then, Thanks for watching this video. Leave your comments. Happy investing.